Hello, it's Professor Gibson, and we are going to cover a way of testing to see if an argument is valid. All right. So the key thing is we're going to put these arguments into a truth table in a certain format. Okay. And here's the thing: an argument is only valid if the final column of the truth table evaluating the argument is all true. If every single one of them is true when you put it in this format we're going to show you here. All right. Then the argument is true. What it means is it has to be true in every possible case, and that's what will happen. If it's true in every case, then the last column is all true. If it's false in any case, then that'll show up in the last column of the truth table, and the argument is considered false. All right. So let's look at this line right here. You see this format with all these parentheses and this and in the middle of it here. Okay. Well, it refers to something like this. You'll see the questions. They'll look like this, and they'll give you some arguments. So like this first one here, this is a premise. P implies not Q. Here's a second premise. P and Q. All right. Pull this across. A lot of times they'll have a little three things on here. It means therefore P. Okay. Now, so these first two, anything above the line is a premise. Sometimes there's three of them. Sometimes there's two. Theoretically, there could be as many as you want. We won't do anything with a bunch of them. Then here's the format you do. So you have a premise, and if it's anything more complicated than a single variable, then you put parentheses around it, right? Then you put an and you do the next premise. Again, if it's anything more complicated than a single variable, you put parentheses around it. Then you put the square brackets, which is really just another kind of parentheses, around it. On my computer keyboard, the square brackets are just above and to the left of my enter key. Now, then they have this, you'll see it's in the symbol palette in Connect. It's this double arrow implies. It's really just the same thing as an if-then. Not quite sure why they're using a special symbol for it, but nonetheless, it's what they're doing. They want this one. Okay, so the software is very picky about these. You have to use these round parentheses. You have to use these square parentheses. You have to use the right arrow with the double line. Okay. Then you have your conclusion. Now I didn't put parentheses around it because in this example it's a simple statement. If you had a more complicated conclusion out here that was more than just a single variable, you would put the parentheses. Okay. Now the truth table, again, we're going to follow the same pattern we ever had before. We just have to evaluate this kind of messier statement. Okay. So if this is our thing here, this is what they're given. What we're going to end up with the thing to evaluate is P implies, or if P, then not Q. All right, and then you put an and between each of the parentheses, and then P or Q, close parenthesis, and that completes everything above the line. So then we need the square parentheses around that. And we need our double arrow if then, okay? And then the last one over here is just P, so since it's a simple thing, we don't need parentheses. This is what we're going to evaluate in the truth table, all right? So here's our first thing. We need to do if P, then not Q, all right? And they're going to, as usual, they usually give us these, the P and the Q. Like that. All right, so I'm going to need a not Q to evaluate this thing. So that's just the reverse of the Q. True turns into false, false turns into true. Now then we need one for this whole thing here. So P implies not Q. Or in other words, if P, not Q. Right? So remember the rule for an if then is it's only false when it goes true and then false, right? So looking at the P column and the not Q column, there's true and then false. That's my one situation where it's false, true and then false. All right, and that's the only place, if you look at those two columns, that's the only place where we have true and then false, so the others are true, right? because it's only false when it's true and then false. Actually, let me number these for future ones. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So now I've got this parenthesis. So I need this one. So this one is P and Q. That's column 5. You remember the rule for P and Q, it's true only when they're both true. So if you look at columns 1 and 2 here, the only place they're both true is the first one. All right? Columns 1 and 2 is P and Q. Only place they're both true is the first column, or the first row, excuse me. So the rest of them are false. Now, so now we've got everything to the left of this sort of the fancy if-then symbol here, right? So go ahead and put it in. What this comes down to is this one right here, right? This is column 4. I wrote the wrong symbol. I'm probably driving you all crazy. It's and. You need to do an and here. You're anding them. So here's column 4 and column 5. Column 4 and column 5. So looking over here at column 4, now it's an and, right? And is true only when they're both true. If you look at 4 and 5 here, they are never both true in the same row, right? And since they're only true when they're both true and they're never both true, this is all false. Okay? Now, this is column 6. And so then our final thing is that column 6 get a double arrow for P, right? And again, this is just an if. If then is only true when it's true implies false, right? Well, if you look over here in column 6, it's never true. So the situation is here. This is the only place where it could be false, and that never happens, right? So these are all true. So these are complicated questions, right? The answer to this one is it's valid. This particular argument is valid because they're all true. And if any of these had been false, it would not have been valid. Let's do one more example. So, again, above the line, I have P yes. So again, this first was the same first as last time, P and not Q, parenthesis. You got to and them together. P or Q. That finishes everything above the line, so you got to put square brackets around it. And then we get our kind of a equal sign right arrow. And then this time the conclusion, the thing below the line, does have more than just one variable in it, so you have to put parentheses around it. All right, you ready? So again, you're typically going to be given the trues here and the false, but you be given all the values for the P and the Q. All right, looking at this first one, see I need a not Q, right? Okay, not Q is the opposite of Q. Now I'm ready to do this whole statement in parentheses. P and not Q. All right, and is true only when they're both true. And in this case, that's only here in the second row. It's the only place where P and not Q are both true. All right, so all the others are false. Our next one is P or Q here. P or Q is true, except when they're both false. So P and Q, these first are these ever both false? Yes, they're only both false in that last row, right? And so it's going to be true everywhere else. Let's number my columns again. All right, so now I have everything that's to the left of this, of my big if here, right? My big if then. So let's go ahead and evaluate all the stuff to the left. So 6 is going to, there's our and, so it's going to be 4 and 5, column 4 and column 5. Remember, it's an and, so it's true only when they're both true. False, true, true, true. So it's true there. False, true, false. So the only place they're both true is here in row 2, so all the rest of them are false. All right. So now we get over to the right. We'll do a separate column for this one. Okay. If P, then Q. All right, we're getting very close to the end. So we've got if P, then Q. Now the kind of little bit of catch to this one is this, you'll see this is just P and Q, right? P and Q. So that means we've got to come all the way back over here to columns 1 and 2. All right. Remember that P and Q is only false when it's true followed by false. That's right here where I've got this arrow, right? True in columns 1 and 2, the only place you got true followed by false is the second row. The first row is true, true, then true, false. So this is the only place it's false. So then we get true, false, true, true. All right, and now for the grand finale, our 8th column is we're really taking now this whole thing right here, right, which is column 6. So if 6, then 7, okay? So again, it's only false if it's true, then false. And the only place that happens, again, you look here in row 2, true and then false, so it's false. And then true, true, true. Now, remember in the big picture, what are we trying to do here? The question is, was this this system that they proposed for us here valid, right? The answer is no, it's not valid, because one of them is false, okay? To be valid, it has to be true in every possible case. And in this second case here, this one's false. So this particular one comes out not valid. All right, that's it. I hope you find that helpful.